Good afternoon, and welcome to our final day of SCSP's new special LinkedIn Live series, Lunch and Learn, Exploring the Implications of Generative AI on National Security. If you've spent the last week with us, we've covered topics from innovation to society to governance to economy. You name it. If you scroll down after this live event, you can find the rest of our report summed up in 20 to 30 minute live conversations over the past week. Thank you to our followers so much for joining us. And before you do scroll down to those next episodes, let's get today's started. So I have the privilege today of joining our authors of Implications of Generative Artificial Intelligence for the U.S. Intelligence Community. And with me, I have Chip Usher and Megan Woff. If we could start the conversation today, and if you could just give our followers a brief overview of who you are, where you came from, your background, that would be great.
Thank you, Anya. Thank you for the welcome. I see you've left the best for last, keeping the intelligence panel for the final episode. My name is Chip Usher, and I'm the Senior Director for Intelligence here at SCSP. Before joining the organization earlier this year, I spent about 30 years with CIA, where I was a manager and leader of all source analysis, focusing primarily on the Near East and East Asia.
And Megan?
Thank you, Ariana. Hello, everyone. My name is Megan Woff. I'm an Associate Director for Intelligence here at SCSP. Before coming to SCSP, I served in positions under the U.S. Department of Commerce, House of Representatives, and I was a Fulbright grantee in Malaysia.
Great. Well, it's great to have you both with us. Before we sort of get into the weeds of your report, I just want to let our followers know that if you're looking for a general overview of the entire report, you can watch our first LinkedIn Live on innovation, where I was joined by David Lin and Abigail Kukura. They'll give the full summary of the report at large. But for today's topic on intelligence, Chip, could you give us a brief overview of what your team's memo is about?
Absolutely. Happy to do so. The short story is generative AI, to me, is probably the most exciting technological innovation that the intelligence community has confronted really since the advent of the internet. You've heard a lot about the challenge of big data. This has been an all-consuming issue for the intelligence community for the last couple of decades. Just to put some things into perspective, every hour, there are about 1.4 million phone calls made. I'm sorry, that's per second. Much more in a day.
Wow.
It's estimated that in 2024, the world is going to generate 149 zettabytes worth of data. Each zettabyte is 10 to the 21st power. It's an enormous amount of data. When I first started as an intelligence analyst 30 years ago, my queue would have a couple of hundred documents that I'd have to go through. When I ended my career, I had like 800 emails alone a day. Each analyst got thousands of documents that they were expected to go through. And what generative AI is finally going to enable the intelligence community to do is grapple with this big data challenge, because it really is the technology that allows an organization to sift and sort through enormous amounts of data to find the relevant insights. The key nature of the intelligence business will remain as it is: provide decisive decision advantage for U.S. policymakers. What generative AI is going to do is allow us to do that in this big data world that we're now living in at speed. And so what the report argues is that the president really should demand three things of the intelligence community. The first is to understand how our foreign adversaries and competitors are making use of generative AI, what their capabilities are, the vulnerabilities of their large language models, if they have them, and what their intentions are for their use. The second is to defend our own systems from adversaries' capabilities. If we're going to be using large language models, then they could be attacked or weakened by foreign adversaries. And adversaries who deploy Gen AI will be that much more effective in cyber warfare and in several other areas that they can attack our systems. So we need to harden them. And the third and most important in our view is that the intelligence community needs to begin experimenting and using generative AI tools itself to improve its own business processes. So that's what the report's about.
Awesome. Well, thank you for the overview. Megan, I'd like to expand on the last comment that Chip just shared with us, which is how is generative AI going to impact the intelligence community, and where are we going to see it in the work?
Thank you for that question. So there are really three big areas where generative AI will impact how the intelligence community works and does its work. The first is countering foreign malign influence. So as we're seeing generative AI tools come online, there's a potential for adversaries to use them at an increased scale, scope, and volume for disinformation campaigns or influence operations. This is not only about creating synthetic content or synthetically altered content through AI, but also tools to amplify that content faster. Some examples of this include a CCP-backed influence operation after the Lahaina fires in Hawaii in August, where we saw completely AI-generated images come out from the CCP operation about a rumor that U.S. weather services had started the fire. Another example is the Spamouflage Dragon campaign. And this campaign was first identified in 2019 by reporters at Graphica. And at the time, there was some AI use in this pro-CCP influence operation. It's gotten to the point that over the years, and by February 2023, the Spamouflage Dragon operators had completely adopted AI tools, so they have fully synthetic AI avatars that are parts of this influence campaign. And that's a new and novel technique. And as a point of reference, the Spamouflage Dragon campaign was the one that Meta took down in August. That was the largest they'd ever taken down, with over 7,700 Facebook accounts and 954 pages. This is a huge AI-enabled influence operation. So that's the first area, and probably the one people are most familiar with. The second is that Gen AI tools really help the US intelligence community to sift through open source intelligence. So as Chip mentioned, there are troves and troves of data out there, and Gen AI tools help analysts and others to go through that data quickly and find insights. The third area is really human-machine teaming. So AI tools, Gen AI tools, are there to help analysts, to help others within the intelligence community to do their tasks on a day-to-day basis. And for those interested, there is a chart of that in our memo where we talk through every part of the intelligence cycle and how Gen AI can be helpful.
Great. So it sounds like the challenges are pretty clear. You guys have laid out the groundwork. How, Chip, are we able to sort of lay out the key moves that our intelligence leaders can be thinking about and making to get us on track with generative AI in the community?
Great question. So in our report, we lay out really three things that the intelligence leadership in our country ought to be considering doing in the short term. The first is, like the Pentagon, we think the intelligence community should appoint a senior official to be the lead for artificial intelligence, to carry out the three missions that I mentioned earlier, to understand how our adversaries are using it, defend our systems, and to follow through on what the president's called on the government to do today in his executive order, to start employing safe and responsible artificial intelligence. So there should be a focal point, somebody that's going to report directly to the DNI on the IC's progress against these goals. And then that person should bring together the relevant components, those departments and agencies that are most experienced and are already using artificial intelligence, to set forth some guidelines for how the IC will use these tools. And those guidelines should probably cover a couple of areas. One is to think about what are the parameters for bringing in private sector developed large language models and associated tools. Anytime the intelligence community wants to make use of outside developed software tools, we have to think about security. We have to make sure that they don't generate harm when we bring them in. So those parameters for artificial intelligence need to be established. They also need to address the issue of private information. So by statute, the U.S. intelligence community is forbidden from collecting on, analyzing US citizens. That's the role of law enforcement. And for most of our traditional intelligence work, the line is easily maintained. But for large language models that are trained on the internet, and as we all have probably heard, 2/3 of the information available on the World Wide Web is somehow involving US private citizens, either posting on Facebook or sharing some of their private data to a vendor. So private information on US citizens is sort of baked into these large language models. Our intelligence agencies need guidance supported by Congress, backed by the White House, about how they can use these models that might include private information. We think it can be done safely, but that needs to be looked at and they need to be provided guidance. And lastly, when the intelligence community begins deploying these in what Megan described as human-machine teams, there's going to be some impacts on the tradecraft. I would say at this point, if I were the DNI, I would feel a little uncomfortable giving the president a presidential daily brief article purely drafted by ChatGPT. But in the not too distant future, I may feel equally uncomfortable giving the president a PDB that doesn't somehow reflect the best that a future large language model could bring to bear. For example, making sure that all the sources that were used in that article are still sound and haven't been withdrawn or canceled because of some CI issue, that the best tradecraft was deployed. So AI tools will be essential in the creation of intelligence work in the future, but the tradecraft needs to be developed to partner with that. The third and last area is as the intelligence community begins developing and deploying tools, it really should think early on about how to bring in our allies and partners. Our great strength in our competition with dictatorships around the world, PRC, Russia, et cetera, is our alliances and friendships with nations around the world. And if they fall too far behind in their capability in this area, then there'll be a mismatch between the US and our friends, and that could lead to weaknesses in our alliance structure, and we don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely. Chip, I'd like to go back to a comment that you made at the beginning, which is that the IC needs to move quickly. Why the urgency?
Really for two reasons. One, the technology is advancing so very rapidly. ChatGPT was introduced, only last November, and ChatGPT 4 debuted 4 months later. That's an incredible rate for technology development. So the IC needs to begin experimenting, begin engaging with the private sector vendors who are doing these tools so they can keep up. And the other second factor, very critical, is our adversaries aren't sitting by idly watching this happen. PRC and other global competitors are developing their own large language models to use generative AI, and they certainly will not be as restrained perhaps as we will be in their use. We need to understand how they're doing it and keep pace.
Yeah. Megan, the report emphasizes the need to build up the IC's technical expertise on AI. What steps can be taken to attract talent and hopefully move this forward?
Thank you, Ariana. So that's a great question. And in the report, we lay out 4 key steps. The first is really to establish a universal AI technical competence standard. This is about building on existing and leveraging new skills that are related to generative AI in the IC. And it's also about leaning into existing talent exchange programs like the public-private talent exchange. So that's on the skills side. The second one is about building official career tracks. So what are the different occupational series? What are the different policies and official position titles that signal that generative AI fields, anything related to generative AI, are really important to how the IC will be operating going forward. The third area is really revamping analytic incentives. These generative AI tools that we're talking about, that Chip just went into, they're changing how analysts work. And so for the analysts to be able to do their work with these tools, we have to change how the analytic incentives work and enable them to use AI assistance or human machine teaming however is deemed safe and secure for the IC to do so. And different ways of doing this could be giving the analysts the skills they need and the tools they need. It could also be things like creating bonus incentives. So the CIA currently gives bonuses if you learn a critical language that they need. We could do that with different computer languages or prompt engineering, data architecture. There are so many different ways to encourage these skills. And then finally, and really the key thing, because we are in a geopolitical competition right now, is leveraging American expertise for this competition. And this means looking not only at the talent the IC has to offer, but leveraging what we have in the United States for talent. And we recommend a National Intelligence Reserve Corps where people can sign up and they can provide their insights when it's appropriate to do so and when it's needed. And this also builds on a former recommendation from the National Security Commission on AI for a digital reserve corps. So doing something like that, but for the IC. And it's truly about opening up opportunities for public-private relationships and leveraging what we have here at home.
That's great. And just the last question that we've asked of all of our teams, and I think it's something important, as people are looking at this report and maybe are not sure where to dig in or what topic they're interested in, is just to maybe leave with the bottom line. Why is this important? Why does it matter to you? Why does it matter to me?
Well, I can take a shot at it. I think for any American, you want to have the U.S. intelligence community at the forefront of technology and positioned to provide the president and his senior advisors with, as I said earlier, decisive decision advantage. Generative AI is going to be a really exciting new technology that will allow the intelligence community to do even more than it does today. The IC has mastered the dark arts. We collect all sorts of secret intelligence on our adversaries, and we do so at a great pace and great scale. This will expand the aperture of what the IC can accomplish by allowing us to tap into publicly and commercially available data at greater scale and at greater speed so that our country is better defended and we're able to meet the challenge of this geostrategic competition with China.
Awesome. Well, thank you to you both for joining us today. This has been Chip Usher and Megan Waff from our intelligence panel, joining us for our final day of Lunch and Learn, exploring the implications of generative AI on national security. Also, a huge thank you to you, our followers, for joining us for our first LinkedIn Live series. It's been a pleasure for us to spend the week diving into our material. And if you're interested in staying in touch with SCSP, be sure to subscribe to our Substack newsletter. It's called 222, or follow us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Instagram. You can find all of this information at our website, which is scsp.ai. And if you're interested in getting involved or learning more about the organization, you can also email us at info@scsp.ai. Again, thank you for joining us for this new special LinkedIn series, and we hope to see you soon.